Anyway, we're going to start as we usually do with meditation, about 15, 20 minutes of meditation. So let's just settle into your meditation posture, position. Main thing is when we meditate, we want to make sure the body, the top of the body is upright, the spine is straight, shoulders are back. Just breathing in deeply, all the way through, allowing the breath to just go through all the body and exhaling any stale airs, stale wind, stale mind. If it's helpful, you can do the 9-round breathing, just to clarify the mind, to bring a bit more brightness and energy to the mind by clearing the winds. Inhale through the, closing off the right nostril, inhale through the left, exhale through the right 3 times. Same again on the opposite side, with the first finger of the right hand closing off the left nostril. Inhale through the right, exhale through the left 3 times. In through both nostrils, inhaling and exhaling 3 times. And then for a few minutes, just settling into being with the breath. A little bit placement meditation on the breathing at the tip of the nostrils, or you can use the abdomen or whatever, if you've got another type of object you use for placement. Just let's do this for a few minutes, just to calm and bring the mind here, more present. Okay, so in that space, that more quietude of the mind, see if you can just reflect on your motivation for a minute, clarify your motivation for the class. And in that space, take a moment to see if what do you feel fortunate about in your life? What comes up when you think, I'm so fortunate to have about what I have in my life? What appears to the mind? What feelings come up? So in terms of the teaching on Buddhism, the understanding that we have this precious human life, as Lama Tsongkhapa says, in the second stanza on his prayer, the foundation of all good qualities, understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once, is greatly meaningful and difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly day and night takes its essence. So we've already uncovered the part of the Lam Rim where we start to recognise the fortune that we have to have met the Dharma, to meet incredible teachers, to have from our own side this curiosity, this interest in the Dharma, to have a curiosity to develop our mind, an openness, a willingness to try and develop our mind on the path to enlightenment. It's such a rare thing in this world, to really recognise the benefits of virtue, recognise the benefits of practicing morality, recognising the benefits of thinking about deeper matters like death and rebirth. So what really allows us even more deeply, more clearly, with more energy to take the essence of this life is the contemplation on death and rebirth. Thinking about our life being short. We're definitely going to die, that's inevitable. But also the fact that our life is kind of like a flash of lightning, it's going so quickly. So taking hold of that mind, that sense of urgency, when we reflect on death and the time of death, it being indefinite, that brings a deeper sense of urgency and energy to practice. So that's what we're looking into with this class, understanding more deeply the process, a healthy process to think and contemplate on death. And that allows us to really, really take hold of our precious human rebirth, take hold of this opportunity, use our life most meaningfully. Not just for ourselves, the more we develop ourselves, the more we can benefit others. So the ultimate goal is to be, really qualified to benefit others. And this is the process the Lam Rim. By listening and reflecting and meditating, we become more and more qualified. Our mind has more ability and power to benefit others. And as a support for our practice, we're going to do this short meditation, support for us listening, so we can listen clearly and also receive some blessing, some inspiration through the practice and the mantra, just to be able to really understand more deeply the topics. So that's what these practices do, really support our inner development of the Lam Rim, makes it happen. These realizations happen more quickly by doing these practices. So imagine just taking a moment just to feel the presence of this deity, Chenrezig, embodying compassion, this moon-like energy in the space before us. Very beautiful, very radiant with these 1,000 arms, like vast aura, embracing me and all beings. Just like me, all beings are under the control of birth and death. karma and delusion. We're all the same in that. So we can feel all beings around us, like grains of sand in the ocean, under the ocean. Vast is space. We're all taking refuge in the Buddha, the Chenrezig, and his qualities, and the Dharma, the medicine, the medication for our mind, and the spiritual community that support us, guide us, hold us on the path. O Sangye Chodan Sogi Chognamla Janju Bardu Dani Kyap Suji Dagi Jinso Yebe Sonambi Jola Penjir Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chodan Sogi Chognamla Janju Bardu Dani Kyap Suji Dagi Chenso Gebe Sonamgi Drola Penjir Sange Druparshok. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Again, just placing imprints on our mind. You know, this is the 4 immeasurables are kind of the basis for bodhicitta. They help really to develop this vast awakening mind of bodhicitta. So every time we recite each one, it places a positive seed that will ripen into these 4 qualities, these limitless qualities. We recite together. How wonderful it would be if I and all sentient beings were to abide in equanimity, free from attachment for some and hatred for others. How wonderful it would be if I and all sentient beings had happiness and the cause of happiness. How wonderful it would be if I and all sentient beings were free from suffering and the cause of suffering. How wonderful it would be if I and all sentient beings were never separated from the bliss of high rebirth and liberation. Offering a mandala, it's like having the universe in your hands. So if you're familiar, we can make the mandala mudra and imagine the 4 continents. We're on the southern continent, the sun and the moon. All the enjoyments on this in this world system, especially our own enjoyments, things that we're attached to. We try to release that attachment by offering them through visualization and to the heart of Chenrezig, the Buddha compassion. So we try and offer as much as possible, visualize as much as we can, as vast as we can, like the sky, flowers, beautiful lights, perfume, music, beautiful places, beaches, you know, in the mountains, wherever, whatever we enjoy, as well as the enjoyments of the other universes, if you're aware of them, and the sun and the moon. Bright and big, as much as we can imagine. Okay. Banquet offerings. Saji bogi jushimeto tramri rablingje nye de gyambadi sangye jindume te uwarye drogunam dagjina Chubarshok, this ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine as a Buddha field and offer it. May all transmigratory beings enjoy this pure land. Yeram Guru Radna Mandala Gamne Yadayami. And we make a request. So we want our mind to really waken up with the Dharma. So we request that blessing, that inspiration from the heart of Chenrezig, you know, to really open up our mind so we get a deep understanding of the topics. Please bless my mind to become Dharma, Dharma to become the path, and the path to be without obstacles, that I may cease all wrong concepts and immediately generate the 2 precious bodhicittas. Chenrezig's really pleased, and from his heart, light and nectar flow down, entering through my crown, and we just receive that blessing of this, the mantra. So we recite a few times together. The mantra that embodies, encapsulates bodhicitta and emptiness, or the two bodhicittas. So all the path, every mantra contains the whole path within the sound, within the letters and syllables. So we recite a few times together. Oi mani padme hum, om 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 mani padme hum. Om mani padme hum, 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 om mani padme hum. Om mani padme hum, om mani padme hum. Again, feel the light and nectar coming from the heart of Chenrezig, just filling our crown, our whole being. Blessing our body, speech and mind. All the qualities and realizations that Chenrezig has, that deep understanding of the topics of the Lamrim, direct experience of the Lamrim. Okay, so we go into the PowerPoint. Okay, so excuse me, I'll just get some water. So again, just a quick review. So I was very happy to hear in the beginning some of you have been doing the reading, so that's wonderful. It really, it helps to support, and there's such great books now on this topic that help us also, not just for the traditional Lamrim text, but the point of view Westerners. Many Western teachers have written on this topic now, so it really helps us to understand using examples in our own culture, of how to really reflect and think about death and impermanence, and also how it really benefits our life. So I just want to go over very briefly, again, the benefits, because I think there can't, I'm probably right in saying it's not an easy topic to really meditate on. In some ways, we like to think about it and we're curious, but when you actually have to sit down and meditate on it, it can be quite tough. It can be a wee bit uncomfortable and unsettling. So actually, though, just change this a little bit here. So, but actually what we'll find is when we start, for some of you who've already been meditating on it, it helps to reduce this unhealthy fear of avoidance we have, or avoidance that we can have about meditating on death, or sometimes we feel, so Venerable Sangye Kadro in this book that Stan said he's been reading, and it's a wonderful book, with Venerable Sangye Kadro using Lama Zopa Rinpoche's teachings and some of her own examples and experiences to really, get to understand what our relationship with death should be, in the Buddhist tradition, how we should really think about death, see death, use it as a tool to spur us on to practice. So what she mentioned in this book as well, she was coming from her early days when she first went to Nepal, I think in the 70s. She's a senior nun now, and I know that she teaches at Tupton Norbaling and some other centres. She mentioned, that when she first met the Dharma, she thought that, I'm okay, I don't really have a fear of death, I'm fine, I don't have any issue with death. And then they were all at Kopan, and there was an earthquake in Nepal. Now, I don't think it was a really serious one, but it was quite strong. And then she realized all this fear that came up around death, the fear that, something was going to happen to her. And she realized that, no, actually, I don't have a healthy, I think that I'm okay with dying. I think I'm okay. But there was an unhealthy fear that came up because of our avoidance of death. We don't look at it in the face. So a wholesome fear here, I think, really means in the beginning. I'm wary to use the term fear, but it can be a fear at some point if we develop it really daily, a really healthy fear. But right now, at least, what we need is a healthy awareness of death, so that at the time of death, the more we're aware of something that's approaching us moment to moment, minute by minute, the more we're aware of it, the more we think about it, the more we know about the death process. Again, that'll come up in a couple of, not next week, but the week after. So the more we face it, we look at it in the face, then we're not going to have an unhealthy fear. It's a little bit like, we see people who have like lots of anger, maybe they have mental problems. That's really easy for us to see they have a problem, right? And they're not dealing with it. And we can see that if they don't deal with it, there's going to be repercussions, it's just going to cause them more and more problems. So in similar way, it's like us, well, if we don't face death, we're not honest about it, we don't look at it, it's going to be a problem for us at death time. We are going to have unnecessary fears. So it's, it reduces that right away as soon as we start to face it. After all, as the Lama Yeshe said, especially when we in the kind of in light of the Four Noble Truths, right now death is in our nature. It's part of who we are. It's part of our existence. It's part of being in conditioned existence. So we need to look at it. And yeah, some fear will come up, but again, it's like anything, the more we start to work with a problem, the easier it gets with anything in life. So we need to kind of work with it and approach it and with these different methods that we're going to look at in this class, how to think about it. So right away, we start to get rid of that unhealthy fear or avoidance that we have. The other benefit that it has is loosening, one of the main things that death works with is our attachments, especially when we start to look into these meditations tonight, these different ways we contemplate death, the reasonings and the logic we use. We'll start to see that through a natural process of these reasonings and logics, it starts to chip away at our attachment. And of course, the more we understand, Venerable Rabina's wonderful teacher in talking about the drawbacks of attachment, but we can see, attachment, that mind that clings strongly to our, kind of maybe clothing, food, reputation, what people think of us, relationships, people, friends, so many things, that we can cling to in this life that ultimately cause a disturbance. They cause the mind to get disturbed. They end up, due to attachment, we end up with anger, stress, anxiety. It creates an unsettled state of mind. So death is one of the sort of thinking about our death, thinking about an inevitability of death, and it's definitely going to happen. It does start to kind of loosen up that mind, and create more space in the mind. It starts, again, it's because we're becoming more realistic with our nature. Nature of the mind is pure, clear knowing, free attachment, clinging, grasping. So death is really thinking about death is the first process to start to loosen that grippy attachment that we have in the mind. It also helps us to, through loosening an attachment, maybe to our possessions, friends, family, kind of career, expectations, our body. By loosening our attachment in a healthy way, it also creates openness and space for us to be more generous, more loving, more kind. It creates that result. And ultimately, with less attachment, of course, that mind that kind of disturbs the mind, that also results, when we have clinging and attachment and things don't work out the way we want, then anger comes, agitation comes. So as we reduce attachment, we reduce anger. And as we reduce anger, more and more peace starts to happen. And again, as I mentioned last week, it's like someone, when we really think more deeply about the definite time of our death, the definiteness of our death, and also the indefinite time, it becomes like a wake-up call, it becomes like, wait a minute, what is really the purpose of my life? My life is short. It's not going to last for very long, so what do I really want to do with my life? That's kind of the environment we want to create, that kind of wake-up call of, I need to use my life really meaningfully right now. And especially a lot of us are getting older, yeah? So we can feel that time is of the essence, so to speak. And the other thing that it does, when we think about death, the more we face it, the more we're honest about it, the more we recognize that truth of life, the more, and it's and for sure, it brings us, it just redirects our mind in a meaningful way, and we don't cheat ourselves, we make our life meaningful, and then that way we don't have regrets at the death time. Because if we just spend our life on this life's affairs and don't really, think about more meaningful things, especially in light of meeting these incredible teachings on the path to enlightenment, in light of we have a consciousness that can develop all these incredible qualities. We have this opportunity with this precious human life. We have these great teachers. We have these incredible teachings that are still alive in our world system. They're still there for us to practice. We have the Sangha to support us. So in light of that, we don't cheat ourselves, we use death and impermanence to make every moment through this meditation as meaningful as possible. So it really, as I say, it's a real great wake-up call. It's a redirection. And even for those of us who have been in the Dharma for some time, we can still spend a lot of, me, myself included, and I've heard a lot of practitioners, they say if we don't cover these sort of basic topics of precious human rebirth, death and impermanence, if we don't think about them again and again, we will still kind of go into the comforts of this life, still end up spending more time on the comforts of this life. It's, still, do some Dharma practice by the way, but maybe not put our best foot forward with that, because we really haven't thought about how precious every moment is, and that really we don't know when we're going to die, it's completely indefinite. So that we need to, we really need to, for our own goodness, for our own, to really, it's like the best thing we can do for ourselves, is to really make that wake-up call, do that wake-up call every morning, at least in some way, to reflect on death and impermanence. The result should be, as Venerable Rubina says, it's not a meditation that it feels like maybe we get depressed, thinking about death. But when we kind of work out skillfully, we know skillfully how to meditate on this, it actually makes the mind more happy, because the mind's more peaceful, it's less attached. It gets less expectations, less fear, so mind opens up, it's more happy. And also in the even in the way, the 3 levels of spiritual happiness. So I say the first one is, so for some of us, we may not even be doing this course with the idea that, I want to get enlightened, I want to get free from samsara. That might, as we move into the modules, that sort of motivation might start to form more in our minds. The more we understand the nature of samsara, the more we understand that we have this possibility to develop bodhicitta, this great awakening, enlightening mind that we see in the example of some of your teachers, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. But even right now, without even those sort of more noble thoughts, thinking about death and just reminding ourselves that death helps us to have a more virtuous life. It helps us, if we think about it in the morning, we're definitely going to have less clinging that day, we're going to be a wee bit more open, a wee bit more soft, a wee bit more kind. So even though we don't go into the sort of deeper, more profound topics of, liberation and enlightenment, for anyone who thinks about death in a clear, healthy way, that it's definitely going to happen, and we don't know when, we'll naturally create more virtue. That is our nature is goodness, our nature is virtue. So it'll naturally support us to create virtue, which creates the cause for happiness in future lives. It protects our mind for future lives, to have a good future rebirth. So that in that level, even on the first level of spiritual happiness, it's really good to think about death. And of course, for these great holy beings like Milarepa, as he says in Horror of Death, I took to the mountains. Again and again, I meditated on the uncertainty of the hour of death. Capturing the fortress of the deathless, unending nature in mind, now all fear of death is over and done. So certainly for, for those of us who want to really develop more fully, really to, even just to get a good understanding this life of samsara, the nature of cyclic existence, the causes and conditions that cause us to release ourselves from death and rebirth, from old age, sickness and death. Even to get a better understanding of that, even to dip into some of those meditation topics, spend more time on them, and to dip into or get a deeper understanding of bodhicitta and the wonderful mind of, emptiness, that really liberates from samsara. We need to have a lot of energy, and where that comes from is the meditation on death and impermanence, recognizing the limits we have on our time here, So, and as I say, Milarepa used death. He utilized that meditation to its sort of highest capacity. He had a very deep, keen insight into it. So that spurred him. That was his catalyst to go into the mountain, and not just to be in the mountains to meditate, but to stay there for many, many years and go through all the hardships and to complete his practice. And for all the great yogis, all the great holy beings, it's the meditation on death and impermanence that allows them to stay in the practice, allows them to go through some of the hardships, some of the real challenges to really get these higher realizations. I mean, Milarepa had great grit, and that grit and determination, it was from his meditation on death and impermanence. There's another geshe that's mentioned in the Lam Rim, Liberation in Palm of Your Hand. I don't know if any of you have ever read any of that text as well, famous Lam Rim text by Pabonka Rinpoche. So the section on death and impermanence, one geshe, he said that, his meditation, so he was also one that left, after he's finished studies, as many geshes did and still do, when they finish their studies, they go off to the mountains or to a isolated practice to put into practice, meditate on what they've learned. So he had such a keen insight into death, a strong insight into death, that he, when he was meditating in his cave, he said that there was a huge thorn bush outside his cave, and it was kind of over the door of the cave, but every time he came in and out, he always bumped into the thorn bush and always kind of rubbed his robes or he rubbed against it. But because of his reflection on death and impermanence, and that it could happen at any time, he never got around to cutting it down. I mean, he just thought that it's more important to meditate on the Dharma and, get liberation, develop these qualities, than it is to cut down the bush, So this is kind of what you can see with really great saints and holy beings. I mean, even like St. Francis of Assisi, I'm sure all of you have heard of St. Francis, this great Christian meditator. I don't know, maybe like 11th, 12th century, I might be wrong. Anyway, some centuries ago, he was also very austere, because again, he would have also reflected on death and impermanence, and it makes the mind, it really, really cuts attachment to this life. It cuts attachment to things that really aren't necessary for our spiritual practice. So again, we might not be able to get there with our level of meditation on death and impermanence, but it's wonderful when you read the books on these great holy beings, and it gives a lot of inspiration, and maybe we feel we can do that for a while, and then it sort of dwindles off, and then we need to kind of meditate again more strongly. But it's really through these meditations that these great beings were able to really develop what we call this mind of renunciation. This mind of giving up this life and really seeking these higher qualities of liberation and enlightenment. It gave them the joy, the space, the peace to really be able to do that. It cut this agitated mindy attachment. Even I can see in the example of my own teacher, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. I mean, Rinpoche never slept, And I guess for us, we would go crazy if we did that. I'm not saying that we don't sleep and, but, he would go long hours without food. He didn't have attachment to comfort. I mean, sleeping, lying down, food. There was many years in Rinpoche's earlier years when he was predominantly a meditator and not so much looking after the organization, where he was very austere, he had no interest in food, no interest in lying down or sleeping. I mean, just everything was the opposite to what we do normally. Rinpoche's, and that's someone who has this kind of renounced mind, who's really thought and trained their mind in death and impermanence. And it's not that we just, meditate one time and this is going to happen to us. I mean, this is a training that happens so that naturally our mind is not interested in the things of this life. It naturally is more interested in developing spiritual qualities, these different levels of spiritual qualities, and there's a great joy in that. So again, these are trained minds. So one example of that, maybe not a trained mind in that situation, but thinking that we're practicing renunciation, is in the early days as well at Kopan, when Lama Zopa Rinpoche was teaching, and they were teaching different courses there, Lama and Lama Yeshe and Rinpoche, and at that time there was very little translated into English, in the late 60s, early 70s. But one of the books that was translated very early on was Milarepa's life story. So, of course, not really, it takes some time to really understand these concepts of renunciation and bodhicitta and emptiness. So, and of course, myself included, you read, so you only have something like Milarepa's life story, and we read that, he just wore a thin robe, he went to the mountains, and we think, well, that's renunciation, that's what you do. You just give up everything and you don't care about possessions and you just wear a thin robe. And so there was one, I think, Italian who came to the course, and he appeared, Rinpoche said he appeared with this very thin robe on. He said you could almost see through it. It was so thin. And again, he was probably a hippie, because many hippies at that time, they were the ones that were attracted to the Dharma and came to these courses. So Rinpoche thought, well, he probably read the life story of Milarepa and thought, well, I'm coming to this Kopan course, I want to be renounced, and that's what you do, so you wear a thin robe. But Rinpoche was just saying, that really what renunciation is, it's something we develop mentally. And once we've developed mentally that state of mind, the mind, again, and renunciation is very deeply based on the realization of death and impermanence, that's what kind of really gives the energy for renunciation, that mind, is our contemplation of death and impermanence. So the more we have that naturally, kind of forming in our mind, that feeling, that realization starts to flourish, naturally we'll let go of outside things. Naturally, they just don't have importance. They slip away. So Rinpoche was saying it's not an external thing, renunciation. It's an inner development of the mind. So we don't need to give up our possessions and go about in thin robes right away, It happens naturally through the course of doing these meditations. Our mind moves away from things of this life. They just appear less important to us, and we place more importance, value, and joy in our development. Making sense? I think some of you know that already, but it's a tough renunciation, is a tough one it's not a great word, So it takes a while to understand it, but it's very much seeped in this mind of death and impermanence, this kind of this inner understanding and realization that starts to happen. So again, just to finish, so of all the footprints, that of the elephant is supreme. Similarly, of all the mindfulness meditations, that on death is supreme. Right? So it's the supreme, because it says it supports you in the beginning. It supports you even if you're not going to do a lot of deep practice this life. It'll support your mind and making your life be good. You'll be a good person. You'll do good deeds. It'll wake you up just to that preciousness of life, that level of preciousness and meaning. And for those who really want to, develop more deeply and spend more time in practice and really see the value of, meditating on topics like, trying to develop realizations of emptiness and bodhicitta, renunciation of samsara. That's what will be your energy, your source, your fuel. That has the biggest impact, impression on the mind, because it really allows you to let go of what's not meaningful and embrace and practice everything that's meaningful. The final teaching that the Buddha gave, was everything the Buddha did at that level, when a Buddha, it's called Supreme Nirmanakaya, just dropping that in. So when a holy being comes to this world and manifests enlightenment and performs the 12 deeds, the final deed is always that of passing away. And it's a deed because they're showing us the final teaching is impermanence. Everything that comes into this world, all conditioned phenomena, including our body, our life, everything passes. So his final, teaching to his disciples was everything passes, so please work hard, put effort to gain your own salvation. So even then, so that's how powerful this meditation is. It was the last teaching of the Buddha. Because of course, for a holy being, once our mind, once we've achieved full awakening Buddhahood, it's not possible for the speech and mind to pass away. The speech and mind aspect, or we could just say at this level, the consciousness is already developed full awakening. So it doesn't experience ordinary death. But still, they have this body. The Buddha even appeared with this body that's subject to death and decay. And that only lasts so long. So like that, our body, our life, this appearance of this life only has, a short time. It's because we're born, we have to pass. Because the body's in nature is suffering, it decays. So it's not possible for it to last forever, and it's very, very short the time we have, as the Buddha said. So, grasp the opportunity while you can, because we don't know necessarily right now where our next life's going to take us, where our level of consciousness is going to take us. So as much as we can, we need to prepare for that life. If not, liberation, at least to have a good future rebirth. That's kind of the teaching of the Buddha, the main teaching. Any quick questions, comments with that? Are we all, it's clear. I mean, I think it's clear enough, but does anyone want to ask something, make a comment? I can't see everybody now because I'm still looking at the screen, but Babe, is there anyone with their hand up, or we're good to go?
I think we're good for now.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so how do we meditate in death and impermanence? It's like kind of, so the 9-point death awareness meditation, it's organized around 3 root truths. In a way, it's kind of like home truths. When somebody tells you a home truth, it's like something that's maybe hard to hear, but it's true. It's a bit like this, yeah? So for the Buddha, he's like telling us these home truths, because maybe, some of us, we've been studying the Lamb for him for a while. Some of us were just coming in new. So maybe it's just like we really need to think about these home truths because they're true. It's as soon as we think about them, as soon as the Buddha points them out, it's like you can't really say it's not true. As you go through them, you're going to see that. There's nothing really saying, oh, well, I don't agree with that. I'm sorry. It's like it's kind of staring in you in the face that they are really true. So there's 3 main home truths or root truths, and then each of those has another 3 reasonings and 3 conclusions that you come to. Anyway, we're going to go through them step by step, so you'll see. First one is, so the first root truth, the first home truth, for us deluded beings, us beings that are confused, that are not really maybe thinking about death, not really wanting to, finding it hard, the home truth is, yeah, you do need to think about it, that your death is definite. Right, so we kind of know this. But in some level, we know it in some level, but again, unless we're kind of, spiritual, unless we're really caused to think about it, or we sit down and meditate on it, we don't bring that up to mind, easily, I mean, also what happens is, it cuts through this feeling because we tend to have this feeling that, there's people around us dying all the time, but we don't always relate it to ourselves. We hear on the news. I mean, there's so much going on in the news right now, so much death and desperation and everything all around the world, either through natural disasters and wars. I mean, all these shootings in the States, we hear them about them all the time. But do we, so how do we do this meditation? Do we relate that to ourselves? how much of that is a reality to ourselves? Like, just like them, this is going to happen to me. So this contemplation, again, it's really trying to get us to think really clearly that, and overcome this feeling like, well, death's somewhere away, but I know it's going to happen to me, but probably not today, not tomorrow, it's somewhere over there, So when we think it's definite, again, it's this step-by-step process of making it more face-to-face with us, making it our reality, recognizing it as part of your nature, becoming a home truth for us, quite deeply in the heart, or at least with some more conscious awareness of that. So first point, so again, there's 3 points to this, because the first point, because death will definitely come and therefore cannot be avoided. So how do we think about this one? So again, there's sort of analogies we use, these are reasoning we think to kind of get this clearer in our mind that death's definitely going to come, and we're not going to use, we can't avoid it, even though, of course, deep down we might quite want to, because it's scary and difficult, but we have to really be clear that there's absolutely no way we can avoid death, And how we start to think about that, formulate that in our mind by some reasoning, some examples, is that even if the Buddhas, like Shakyamuni Buddha, he was this great holy being who had, all these qualities and realization, but even he passed away. Think about all the great beings who have come into this, even I think about my teacher, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who was so alive and vibrant and powerful. He passed away, even with his great qualities and realization, because born into this world with this aggregate, this aggregate form that's in the nature of suffering, our body. So even these powerful beings like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, great kings, powerful leaders, we think about people who had so much power in this world before, great presidents, like Gandhi and other countries, famous people that had so much power, but they passed away. So even then, with all that power, if they passed away, so what does that say about me? So this comes from the saying in the Buddha, so we meditate on this about thinking about powerful people or either in our life or in the past, and holy beings, presidents, kings, all those, if they passed away, then there's no question that I'm going to pass away. They had much more power than me. So who am I? There's no question I'm going to pass away. So again, this is chipping away at this kind of thought, this kind of deep down thought or sort of delusion in our mind that, well, we might die, but somewhere far away, it's definite, but there's kind of there's a lack of clarity going on there. So we have to use the logic and reason to kind of battle with that, to get into battle with that wrong logic, that kind of lazy mind that doesn't want to think about death, or is not quite thinking about it. We're not thinking about it clearly, Another reason why death will definitely come and it cannot be avoided is because death, believes in equal opportunity, right? So, so there's no, sorry, back again. So again, whether you are rich or poor, famous, king or a beggar, rich or poor, black or white, Buddhist, Christian, there's nobody, we can't point to anybody who can evade death, has the power to overcome death. Everybody has to face death. We're all equal in that, we've all come into this world under the control of karma and delusion, and we all have to face death the same way, we're all very equal in that. So again, this is another way, just, it's good to think about people we've known, in our life, maybe even go back this life, who's already died in this life. Might be some older people we know, some younger people we know, some richer people we know, some poorer people we know. Just go back and think, if they've all died, so it's definitely going to come to me. So another reason is, so there's no external conditions that we can hide from. So sometimes you think, oh, I've got my, when we're in our house, this is a really nice house. I have a nice house. I feel quite safe here, I'm living in this nice place and I've got good friends. And, so we tend to kind of sometimes feel like our possessions, our belongings, or the place we are creates a kind of safety net. It makes us feel safe, But even they, all of these are subject to change, So there's nothing, there's not, whether it's possessions, family, friends, places we're living in, nothing can really protect us from death, the inevitability of death. They don't have that power. But it's true that, we can feel like sometimes when we're in places, they kind of bring this sense of safety. But in the light of death, there's nothing that can bring a sense of safety. We can't go to a certain place in this world and say, well, if I go there, I might not die. I'll go to this boat, or these mountains are really powerful. If I go there, I might not die. Nothing externally. There's no external condition. Whether it's food or clothing or shelter that has the power to protect us for death. Even the food that sustains us usually, gives us life. It does give us life, it gives us energy, but that can even become something that can, cause us to die. So within itself, nothing has the power to protect from a cell, no external sources. So, just, yes.
I think Stan had
Stan, yeah.
hands up.
Yes, I didn't want to interrupt, but I'm reminded of a news story I heard recently where in advanced computer technology with AI, there's the idea afoot of trying to transfer our consciousness to a machine existence where we won't die and defeat death this way. I don't think I think it's science fiction at this point, but I wonder, if it could ever be achieved. I just can't imagine that would be possible because it goes against all laws of known laws of the universe, of physics. But then so is talking on cell phones over great distances. I mean, from earlier times, that couldn't be imagined. But I wonder if that is something that could be. I think it's delusional to think that, but there are many in that realm that think that that's a solution to death and that it is escapable in that way. I'm not sure why I want to make this comment, but it reminded me of that.
Well, it's true. No, you're right, Stan, because even some people think they're coming up with medicine. Certainly there's a lot of medicine, there's a lot of effort in putting medication to live long, maybe forever's not, we're not quite there yet with the medication. But there's all these ideas about living long, living longer, prolonging life. There's all the emphasis on that. I mean, I'm not surprised that something like that's coming forth. I mean, not that I know a lot about physics, but I can't imagine how that would be possible with my understanding of consciousness.
Right.
And how consciousness takes rebirth. I didn't even know if scientists were at the level where they really, really accept consciousness.
Right. And even if it was possible, then you would be in a consciousness in some machine that has its own impermanence.
Exactly, and then does the machine allow for mental development? Or, I think, of course there's going to be, I'm not surprised something like that's come up, but I don't have the answer to it. But just with my limited I can't imagine that would be at all possible. But as you say, there's been a lot of possibilities, but transferring consciousness into a machine, generally the only ones that have the power to transfer consciousness are holy beings, because they have control of their consciousness. We're talking about consciousnesses like ourselves who don't have control over the death process yet, So I can't imagine machines are going to be able to do that, but who knows with the advancement of AI. Anyway, it's very interesting to keep up with what they're what the advancements are. But even then, if it goes into that machine, does it allow the possibility to liberate your consciousness for rebirth altogether? Do you
right?
see
I mean, it kind of misses the point, doesn't it? I'll stay in this samsaric existence forever.
Yeah, exactly. In a machine, that does what, Maybe
What
if
is
it's
it
a
for?
machine that really benefits sentient beings and you can still develop on the bodhisattva grounds and paths, but I know beyond that, who would want to do that? Maybe
Right.
some ordinary beings would, you see, but certainly us who know the possibilities of mind and consciousness and what you can do, we wouldn't want to take that as an option for sure.
Sure.
Anyway, we'll be curious to
Yes.
see how it develops, what it evolves into.
Yes. Thank
So anyway, so kind of where we get to the end of this sort of short contemplation is that, you know, the Lord of Death resides within all circumstances, you know, like the red hot gas in the flame of an oil lamp. So many external conditions can act. It's true, like you know, there can be earthquakes, there can be harm for the elements, fire. All these things can act as there definitely can be a contributing factor to us passing away, but they can't, there's no way that any external conditions can kind of prevent our death, you know, they can't prevent us from dying. Because just like, you know, from the moment we are born, death is it within our nature, you know, because we're born in samsaric existence, we're born under the control of karma and delusion. So just like this red hot gas in the fire lamp, you know, this is just like the gas eventually runs out, this life will run out, as Nagarjuna says, you know, and that cannot be stopped by any external forces. So we have to try and get a feeling of these topics, you know, each one you have to mull over a little bit in your mind, read it, you know, read over a little bit. So that's the first, that's the first kind of topic that we have to think about death, how death is definite. The next one that I find more juicy and more pertinent for me, and this is the one I tend to meditate on more, it just kind of really impacts my mind more deeply, is because death is definite, because our lifespan cannot be extended and is diminishing unceasingly, or it diminishes unceasingly. As Master Shantideva says, why should I then not die if every day, without fail, this life is always getting shorter and no additions to it will come from anywhere? So again, especially as we get older, this becomes very kind of strong and, you know, very strong and very pertinent, you know, that our life is getting shorter and shorter. So when we come into this, you know, when we come into this world system, we have a sort of karmically predetermined lifespan. We have a certain amount of breaths. I think there's even a text. One student was talking about this recently. I think there is a text in, I don't know, Buddhist cosmology or, you know, the Abhidharma, where you can actually, if you've got some of the astrological aspects of someone's birth, you can work out how many breaths they have in this life. You know, what their karma is, how many times they have the karma to breathe in this life. And then from that, you can work out how long they're going to live, you know. So so either way, you know, we've created certain karma in our past life to have a predetermined lifespan in this life. So there are times we can do certain practices to prolong life. That is possible. But more or less, we have a sort of certain lifespan that we're going to live out this life, a certain amount of breaths. So, and, you know, one of the ways to kind of think about, contemplate, mull over this type of meditation is using the breath, you know. One way to meditate on this sort of life draining from us or finishing every moment by moment is to use the breath, you know. Every time we breathe in another, and, you know, inhale as an inhale and exhale, that's another, I'm getting closer to death. Walking meditation, every time we walk from one place to the other, and that time, with each step, I'm getting closer to death. These are very quite intense meditations, yeah? So rather than just watching your feet, as in maybe some other traditions, mindfulness of the feet, Lama Zopa Rinpoche would say, you know, for us, what we need to do is mindfulness that our life is slipping away with every walk, with every step, with every breath, with every mouthful of food we eat, a mouthful of food we eat, we get that much of our life is slipping away, that much closer we get to death. Or like this example here, suppose one stretches out a string and a child follows it bit by bit. That child will eventually come to its end. So it is with our lives, you know. We're walking, we're moving, We're moving along in that direction day by day, moment by moment, second by second. We're getting closer and closer to the end of the string. So these kind of analogies are very powerful for bringing that thought of the definite time of your death close, you know, close into the mind, close into the heart. Another nice one we could use is like an hourglass. I mean, I don't think people use these much these days, but it's quite, you know, it's also a good analogy for thinking about you turn the glass upside down and each day, you know, each of these grains of sand could be the moment by moment disintegration of my life, you know, the decay of my life, you know, as we are born, you know, we come as babies, but we're in this process of decay from the time of birth. This is the nature of samsara. It's the nature of cyclic existence, conditioned existence. So again, or watching the clock tick over, you know, 9 o'clock. Oh, by 10 o'clock, I'm 1 hour closer to death. By 11 o'clock, I'm another hour closer to death, and that much less I have on this in this life. So in terms of not just diminishing as a lifespan, you know, moment by moment, second by second, don't you think that life's getting faster as you get older? Who has that experience? I certainly feel like that, you know, and I think generally it does say in the, you know, in the text and the scriptures, you know, so it's not just that, you know, like the hourglass or the clock, it's like this sense that, you know, like the waterfall falling off the precipice, you know, so the analogy here is like we came into this life, you know, it's like coming off the waterfall, coming off the precipice here. But as it gets closer and closer to the bottom, which is death, you know, hitting the ground or the surface, the velocity gets quicker, yeah? So similarly, our life, you know, the closer we walk, we live, we work, we move towards death, it's actually time's getting faster. So it's not just this kind of decreasing, but this kind of sense, you know, getting this sense that, gosh, my life's getting more and more precious because it's slipping away even faster, you know, as I move towards that time of death. And this is generally the karma in the human realm, you know, that as we age, each different realm has its own set of karma, depending on where we're reborn, the hells, the pretas, the animals, you know, they have their own set of karma. I mean, we even know that animals, like 1 year for them is like, depending on the animal, 7 years. Is that like that for dogs? And for cats, it's different. I don't know what it is for other animals. But so their appearance in 1 year for a dog is like 7 years, you know. So even their concept of time is different. So in the human realm, we have a certain concept of time. And the other aspect about being born a human is a sense of time and aging, that as we age, time just goes faster and faster and faster. Our karma to be a human is kind of running out almost, you know, really fast. And it's also, it's really good, you know, to go back through our life, you know, when we do this type of meditation and see how that is our experience, you know. I think we can all see that life generally is getting faster and faster. And I don't know if it's just a worldview thing, but I think, you know, I did ask someone, I asked someone here, Arya, she lives at Vajrapani. I mean, she lives in the community. She's 13. She's a very beautiful, young, intelligent girl, and she's often around, you know. So I asked her, you know, do you feel like your life's going really fast? Because I thought maybe it's just, you know, maybe it's a karma now that's happening in this world. But she felt she didn't have the same experience of the speed that I feel like days are going really fast. She didn't have she seemed to feel like how I felt at her age at 13, like during the summer holidays, I used to get kind of bored because there wasn't anything to do and we were hanging around. We had 6, 7 weeks holiday. And so I felt this kind of boredom, or things were going really slow, going through school. So, you know, I think she kind of felt something similar. So I thought, no, it's definitely to do with the appearance of as you age. You know, life just goes, it seems to go so much faster. So again, this is kind of giving us this impotence to really grasp the moment, you know, make what we can, the best use of this time. and you know, in that way, then we're anyway preparing for death. So again, as Master Shantideva says from the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, remaining neither day or night, life is always slipping by and never getting any longer. Why will death not come to one like me? So it kind of sums it up, doesn't it? So again, we're just trying to, I mean, not in a heavy way with ourselves, but in a really realistic way, trying to kind of battle with our sense of that, you know, well, I'm going to die, but it's not going to be now. And, you know, with this kind of delusory way we have it kind of, you know, identifying with death or kind of connecting with death, trying to make it really close. So the last point here to help us to generate this thought that death is definite, this awareness, this clarity in our mind that death is definite, is because even when we are alive, there is little time to practice. So it doesn't really, it's not really kind of working with the idea that death is definite. It's not a real reason as such. But again, what we try to do here in terms of trying to see how we use up our life so quickly in things that are not necessarily spiritual practice, you know. So the first way is, if we think about our life so far, you know, when we were young, you know, we split our life into 3 parts. When we're young, well, a lot of us, you know, most of us didn't meet the Dharma when we were younger, you know, we didn't have we might have still been good people, generally good kids, but we didn't have this openness or ability to meet the Dharma in practice, you know. So the first 20 years plus our life we don't have that opportunity. Then the middle part of our lives, for many of us, we have to have career and children, and, you know, the middle part of life is very, very busy making this life something what we want it to be. So again, in that sense, there can often not a lot of time for spiritual development. And again, when we get older, well, we might think, like many Tibetans think, you know, that, oh yeah, when I'm older, I recite Om Mani Padme Hum and I'll do prostrations and I'll go to the stupa, and, you know, that's kind of part of their culture, they think, when they'll do older. But, you know, we don't know what's going to happen when we're older. And also we have more physical and mental challenges at that age. So it's not so easy to necessarily practice then. So again, in that respect, the time that we are alive in this life, cutting it into 3 sections, how much time do we really engage in spiritual? We haven't had a lot of time to really maybe engage deeply in spiritual practice. And even now, in our day to day, you know, we sleep. Certainly I still sleep too much. We have to eat, we have to work, watch TV, listen to music. There's a lot of other times where we're not necessarily engaging and you know, it's not like spiritual practice has to be full-time meditation, but we can see there's a lot of ways maybe where we don't use opportunities to practice, you know, to use it as practice, to use it to develop the mind. And this is where Lama Zopa Rinpoche, as we'll go into like how to practice more in the last couple of sessions of this topic, Rinpoche used these, he would give us meditations to use sleeping, eating, working, these situations that we do in our daily life anyway, to try and make them Dharma. So we don't have to feel like if we're not in our cushion, we're not practicing Dharma, you know, we're not doing spiritual practice. So there is ways to transform these ordinary activities to make them meaningful, to develop our mind. But in this context of this, we do want to kind of look more honestly, like in what, you know, what ways are we just, is our life slipping away in these ordinary activities and we're not using them for spiritual development. So again, it's just really bringing home this truth that death's definite. And we need to, again, this saying, I don't know if it makes sense in this context, but because we're busy, we need to spend more time meditating, you know. We need to use our time more beneficially to develop the mind. So the conclusion out of thinking about these 3 reasonings why death is definite is that we should think, right, I'm definitely going to die, you know, so I have to practice more Dharma. I have to make at least my actions in my body, speech and mind through the day to day, more meaningful. That's kind of what the result of this contemplation should be, you know, not that. So Venerable Renee, and then we'll just finish at this point. Venerable Renee, because I want to see if there's some questions and comments, but Venerable Renee led a retreat here many years ago. Some of you know who Venerable Renee is. He's a great teacher, a great meditator, and he led a retreat here for about a week on contemplating death and impermanence, how do you think about it in your life? So the first one is thinking about death is definite, that we're covering here. The second one is that the time is indefinite. And the last one is thinking about the fragility of this body and life and how these things can't help us at the death time, you know? So, and then the conclusion we should come to at the end of all these is that I need to practice Dharma. So he led this retreat for about a week, and I think there was a couple, he said, were at the retreat. So they went through all the meditations. So after that retreat, somehow that couple got in touch with him later, and they said, well, they decided, they got really clear that the death was definite, time of death was indefinite, and they thought, well, we don't know how much longer we're going to live, so we're going to go on this big holiday. So they got the first main points of the meditation, but they didn't follow through with. So what we really need to do is practice Dharma, prepare for future lives, develop our mind in these incredible, beautiful qualities of bodhicitta and emptiness. So I remember him sharing maybe that story. He says somehow that didn't quite come across. I mean, it's not to be judgmental, but he just found it very kind of interesting and curious that that was the outcome of their retreat, you know, that they had to just do what they needed to do right now to find some happiness. So the outcome of these meditations should be like, I've only got this limited amount of time, so I want to really make it as useful as possible in the light of these 3 levels of spiritual happiness that we have the capacity and ability to develop. So does anyone want to share anything? Any comments? Anything that kind of maybe struck them through these verses? I mean, some of the kind of quotes from the great masters, did you find any of them kind of pertinent, meaningful, powerful? Nobody? Oh.
Hi, I'm
Jeanette.
Jeanette. I was going to say
Hi.
something. Hi.
Yes. Hi.
I was listening to the Llama on YouTube, and
Yes.
I made it. I think there's 5 minutes remaining, but that was a really powerful meditation on impermanence and the importance of impermanence to the Buddhist way of thinking. And what really struck me about it as I was listening to him is how much compassion that, you know, understanding that we have that shared experience of impermanence and that we have no way of understanding how much longer we'll be here, and how that really unifies people, because we have this shared obstacle. And so that was what I took from it, was the ability that it gives us to be compassionate to others.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true, you know. I mean, this is why when we study the Lam Rim, you know, from Precious Human Rebirth, Death and Impermanence, the nature of samsara, you know, sometimes we think we have compassion for people. It doesn't mean that we don't have a sensitivity and empathy, a kindness towards others, but compassion really comes from understanding the nature of suffering, you know, the understanding that we're in this process of death and rebirth, uncontrolled death and rebirth. And that's where, you know, compassion really takes root, you know, from that understanding of like the bigger picture of the samsaric existence that we're all in. So that's what Rimshi's referring to. So we can feel like, oh, we have compassion for others, we have kindness, but great compassion comes from understanding first the plight that we're in ourselves, you know, uncontrolled death and rebirth, that it continues aging, sickness and death, not just in the human realm, but we can appear in other realms. Really getting to grips with that, getting a clear understanding of that brings compassion for ourselves. And then we also then think, wow, every being I meet's in that process, and most people aren't aware of it. And that, again, that opens your heart. So again, these reflections in death and impermanence, you know, the idea is to apply it to yourself, you know, that my death is definite. I need to get a really clear idea of that, a good feeling for that. And then it's like, well, it's the same with everybody. You know, everybody's in that boat. So yeah, thanks for sharing. Christine. I'm glad that really, you know, and it's also very powerful, isn't it, listening to holy beings, you know, it's a deep impact in your mind. So thank you for sharing, Jeanette. Anyone else want to share anything or any questions, comments? Am I seeing any hands? No, we're all good. So one thing I wanted to ask was, so I remember, like, when I was growing up, just briefly to say this, when I was growing up, I didn't think about death till really maybe in my teens when I became a student, because when I grew up, my grandfather passed away and it did affect me. I thought, oh, you know, he's old and that's a shame because he wanted to live through he died when he was 65 and, you know, he was just about to retire and he would have had, you know, his retirement years and he passed away before he could retire. I had an uncle who passed away in his 50s from cancer. So again, that, you know, I felt that was sad, you know, but I didn't really think about it, my death. I didn't think it in the light of my death. I was just thinking, you know, it's sad for them. I didn't bring to mind some sort of thought that that's going to happen to me. The first time that I thought about it was when somebody, you know, some fellow student was talking about some prediction from Nostradamus. You know, he made all these predictions about the end of the universe, and somebody told me that he predicted that and this was in the 80s, I think, that the universe was going to, you know, come to an end in 1999. You know? And somehow that kind of impacted me. And I thought, and at that time I was studying accounts. So I thought, and that was the first time I thought, well, if I'm going to die in 1999, why am I studying accounts? You know, it's kind of like, if I've only got like 12 years left in this world, what am I doing studying accounts? That was the first time that I applied death to myself. It was the first time I'd heard death and I felt like it had some impact on my life, like it shifted my mindset somehow. And then, of course, after uni, I went and did all these parties and partying. And I mean, I went off in the wrong direction for a while, but then I met the spiritual path. But somehow that really, it was like, I started to feel like, okay, my time is, you know, my life's limited here. So I wonder, does anyone remember the first time that they, you know, something that impacted them to think about death being definite for them? Does anyone have a strong memory of that? Karen, you want to share?
Yeah, I was in graduate school in the middle of the 1990s, and I found out I had a number of real serious chronic health problems. And it, you know, I went through what I call sort of over the next, I mean, I was at that time, they gave me, my shelf life was about 10 years. They said, there's nothing we can do, da, da, da. So obviously medications, things have happened, but, you know, I had to really, really address it at a time when I thought I was just, you know, in my 30s, you know, I was just having fun. I was going to school, everything was great in it. So, because I always talk when we talk in the Lam Room class about death and impermanence, so my teacher's always like, you're not doing it right, you know, the meditation unless you are terrified. And my theory has always been is when people have severe illnesses that they live with for a very long time, we sort of get these sort of near-death experience events that happen, and I think it makes things a little bit different. I mean, like when it happens a lot, it forces us to you know, to not be in denial about it. So, but
I mean, I think there's no question. Yeah, no, I mean, it's in some way it's precious, but of course in another way it's very difficult, you know. So, but yeah, in that level it is precious because it does force you to look at it. It's a reality now, and I guess it will be a strong motivating factor with how you're going to live the rest of your life. I can imagine, you know, as I say, just that already shifted my viewpoint when I just thought a little bit about death, you know, my own death. So it is true, there is this kind of, you know, it does say that, you know, when you do these meditations really well, especially the one we get onto next week, if death is indefinite, the time that can bring up quite a bit of fear. You know, it's not so much death is definite, that does bring up some stuff, but the next week is death is indefinite, the time is indefinite, is definitely more of a fear factor that one, you know. So we'll talk about that a little bit more next week. But so, because we are Oh yeah, we've got about another 5 minutes or so. Anyone else want to share something along the same lines? Maybe again, when they felt something brought up the sense of their death being definite and it maybe having some impact or effect on their life or their.
Dan?
Was I called upon?
Zan, did you have your hand up there?
Stan does. Yes.
Zan,
Sorry.
Zan, no, Zan, do you?
Oh,
No,
sorry.
that's okay. Let him go. Let him go.
I'm
Stan?
sorry.
Okay, Stan, we'll do Stan then, Zan.
Okay. Why not? I just wanted to say, in my own case, I spoke of in an earlier comment a few sessions ago of losing my wife to cancer over a protracted period and being aware of her passing and always thinking, well, she's got 9 years to live. Maybe something will happen to change that perspective. It turned out to be accurate. And then very soon after that, losing very unexpectedly my twin brother. And with a twin brother, I always felt like what happens to him is going to happen to me. And it didn't turn out medically to be the case because we had different things happen to us in our life. But the point is that people very close to me died. And one after my wife after a long period, my brother unexpectedly. And then when I turned 70, I realized I got to retire because how long can I expect to live? 75, 80, maybe. I only got 10 more years to live. And as you say, time is going so fast. Now, the sessions we've been having, I'm thankful to say, have really pointed me in a beautiful direction of embracing this notion that at least I have the awareness of this time passing fleetingly by. And it can really has come a long ways to waken me up to the idea of just focusing on what's really important in this life and see things for what they are and those that are not important, to let them go. And this is part of renunciation eventually, I presume. And
Yes,
but
definitely.
yeah, that's what I had to say about it. It's been really helpful to have this class. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Stan. Thank you for sharing. Zan?
No, that's funny. Quite a while back, my partner and I were living with her grandparents in their respective 90s, Italian immigrants. And we ultimately had to move in with them because they started not being able to care for themselves. Had a lot of accidents, a lot of falls, things like that. And we didn't want either one of them to be living their final days in a facility somewhere. We wanted them to have that dignity of being at home and doing it on their own terms, and kind of seeing them go through those end stages of not only having medical issues, but one going before the other, and seeing a certain level of non-attachment to emotion, not clinging to the love that they had for each other, because they'd been together 70 some years since they were early 20s, right? And then also not clinging to the physical self. So when I was reading today about that level of attachment to the body and to still being attached to your emotional self and the people that you love and you don't want to leave and all this chaos that you may be leaving behind, I helped both of them pass. So it was a little clearer, and for me to kind of be able to stand back a little bit more detached. They weren't my parents, they weren't my grandparents, right?
Yeah.
But having lived with them and helped cared for them, you definitely grow fond of them. But for then, if we scroll forward about 15 years or so, and for my 50th birthday, I got designated with breast cancer. So it's like, pardon my French, but fuck, I'm only 50. Right? So for a fleeting moment, I had that, wow, what am I going to miss? Right? I didn't do everything. Will I ever get to do everything? But it was a moment. And I think mainly because of what I experienced with them allowed me to go, that's not scary.
Mm.
If my ticket has been punched, my ticket has been punched.
Mhm.
Take it for the ride that it is and enjoy the ride for the rest of whatever time you have. I've been very lucky now. I've been 8 years post-treatment and everything's well and good. But I have been living since that diagnosis that, you know, I try to live every day that I have right mindfully. I try not to do wrong by other people. I try to put other people first, live in, you know, in service of others. I will say it has not been easy because there have been many times that has come and bit me in the ass.
Mhm.
You know, so the term no good deed goes unpunished is very true. So you got to kind of
It
come to
comes
terms
back.
with that too, right? So you have the expectation of what expectation did I have of that behavior?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
well,
mean, this has all been just like the past 3 or 4 modules have all kind of gone, okay, all right, I get it.
good.
It's just amazing. So yeah, I honestly am not afraid of it. I'm not welcoming it, but I'm not afraid of it either.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think generally, you know, if one lives the bit, you know, again, we're looking at, you know, different levels of spiritual kind of goals and development. So again, from the first level, from the Buddhist point of view, you know, the first level of, and actually we'll start the class with that next week, the type of deaths that we can think about that we might see, you know, that we could maybe look towards, you know, how am I going to die? You know, there's 3 levels of spiritual practitioners and how they can die. It's like the A practitioners, the B practitioners, and the C grade practitioners. So, you know, generally, if you've, you know, Rinpoche says actually in the video, you know, if we live a good life, we generally we don't get angry, we don't harm others, we live with morality of not harming others, being as kind and helpful as possible, having a good heart. You know, there's a great chance that we're going to have a peaceful death, you know, a good death, which will result in a good rebirth. You know, so that's at least where we want to go. Now, there's different levels of spiritual development. We can also, you know, approach death. If we, you know, these meditations can get us into this place, like I'm saying, these great saints in Milarepa and St. Francis and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when they really let go of so everything in this life and just focus single pointedly in getting out of samsara, you know, getting out of the death process altogether. So there's different levels of spiritual development that we can use this meditation for, you know, with different motivations. But the best one is, you know, the one that we want to mostly get out of this for most is where we are, is like we just want to live, we want to think about death, be realistic about it, so we can have a good death, you know. So we use our life in the best way to have a good death, as you're saying, Zan, you know, that it allows you seeing others die, helping others die, looking at your own mortality. It gives you that space and freedom, and it gives you this motivation to live what time you have left with the best, you know, the best mind, you know, the best heart. So I think we can all see that, but we sometimes that slips, you know. So
sure.
again, if you meditate in the morning a little bit more in depth and do some of these contemplations that I was going to suggest now at the end of the class, this book that I mentioned to a few people who kind of dropped on early, came on earlier, and I mentioned it in the previous module, the book on 365 days of Lam Rim. You can find it on Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive. And again, I think what I'll do this week again, Bea, if that's okay, I'm just going to send you one more reading list, a wee bit more comprehensive, and that'll just cover the whole course. But you can find the free you can download a free PDF file on lywa.com. And again, I'll ask Bea to send out all the details. And you can, there's meditations on there from day 88 to 113, just like 2 paragraphs. And so if you could maybe think about, you know, if you've got time this week to do a few of those meditations on death is definite. The time, okay, Ladan, that's fine. Good night. There's a few there that are just on death is definite, and they're not like, so just reminding us and like giving the mind a chance to work on that and make it more and more a truth for us, more and more reality, reminding us and seeing how it colours our day, you know, in a positive way, you know, wakens up the mind in a positive way for that day. So I was going to suggest if we can do that, and also just, you know, carry on with some of the readings if you're doing them already. And I'll send a few more options as well for this week. And just very briefly, because I mentioned a few people at the start, for those of you who may be interested to do, or I'm doing a ritual training, it's on the chat. I'm leading a ritual training the weekend of November 8th to 10th at Vajrapani. You would need to go through Vajrapani Institute, and it helps you to get a sense of some of these prayers, how you set up an altar, why you set up an altar, how you do it, how you do some offerings, how you do some of the chants, why you do them, how do you do this mandala offering, just very, very basic introduction to ritual and what kind of, how it complements and supports the kind of our Lamrim practice. So that's it's offered online and in person. So just in case anyone's interested, I just wanted to mention that course that's coming up. And we'll just finish with a quick dedication. Just bring the dedication prayers up. Always dedicating to realise the good heart, to always practice the good heart and always gradually, oh, sorry, what happened there? It left. Start again. Oh dear. Do you, so what's, okay, here, something's, okay, stop. Sorry, I'll start again. For some reason it's popping in and out. Oh, okay, I don't know what, you don't see the prayers on your screen, no? Okay, let's just do a short dedication. For some reason they've popped off of the screen and off my computer, so we'll just do a very brief sort of dedication. Again, just always dedicating to, you know, especially as, you know, we study these subjects for us to be able to develop them more deeply in our hearts and our mind and our experience of our lives, bring them in a healthy way, a clear way into the experience of our life, so we make our life most meaningful for ourselves and others. And just dedicating them, not just for our own peace and happiness, but always sharing our merits, our positive energy with all our friends, our family, all our Dharma brothers and sisters, for all living beings in our community, in this world. So many people who are struggling right now in wars and harm for the elements. So just dedicating all the positive energy of this class for all their happiness, for them to have everything they need and all the happiness, the inner happiness and peace up to enlightenment. So may I and all beings receive this by virtue of this class and all the merits and the positive energy we've accumulated. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Venerable.
Thank you. Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful week.
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye, Terry.
Be safe,
Thank you,
everyone.
Venerable.
Bye. Bye,
Thank
Sam.
you.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you very
Bye,
much.
Christine and Tommy. Thank you. Bye, Dana. Bye.